If you're listening to this, you're on the YouTube channel, and you've just realized there's no video on this episode. Why is there no video on this episode? Because I'm an idiot who screwed up the video. It happens. It's brand new. We're trying a new system with two people in different places. I'm trying to do it a different way than everybody else does it. And there was a button I should have hit that I did not hit. And I screwed up everything. The video will return on the next episode of Sox in the Basement. The funny thing is, on this episode, you're going to hear me talk an awful lot about what's on the screen. Proof that this was not planned. We'll get it right eventually. And there's always the audio show, still in the same spot, everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. It's a beautiful day outside. I know as we enter March, the day this episode comes out, I have no idea what it's going to be, but Friday's beautiful, like as we sit here.
Friday's gorgeous, and you're listening. You might be listening to this next winter.
Right, you never know when you're going to get to the show. It's on demand, right? It's anywhere podcasts can be found. Always at soxinthebasement.com. There's video now up on YouTube, which is interesting. We still have to work on the cameras a little bit because I have this big wide shot of me at the bar, which I enjoy. And then the camera's right up on your mug, although you're a little bit further back today. All right, so we'll see.
Well, we'll figure it. I don't have as big of a room. I don't have a 9-foot homemade oak bar here. I've got a very small L-shaped desk.
Well, eventually we'll get you back to the bar. Eventually, when your health is better, we'll get you back to the bar. But at least now we can see you. Everybody else can see you. We know that Ed is living. He looks so much like if only there was video before your heart attack. Like people would have seen the mess you were. Like my son Dominic came down.
Thank you.
Honestly, my son.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, buddy, but you were a mess. My son Dominic came down here recently. Remember, he saw you on the screen when we were recording the last time. And
yes.
Maybe he didn't see you. I think I showed him the video.
I was about to say he was around, but I don't know if he actually saw me on camera.
So he saw the video from the last show. Because I was like, here's what it looks like when we put the show up on YouTube, and it's a work in progress. Like, he was critiquing it. He's like, his camera's got to be moved, Dad. You know, your microphone, in fact, that reminds me, I want to kind of adjust where it's sitting. He's like, that's covering your face. Like, he was critiquing me, right? The 16-year-old about to turn 17 was giving me notes, which was great.
As teenagers will do, no matter what you ask them. They will give you notes.
He was giving me notes. So he looks at you on the screen, and he goes, he looks pretty good for himself. I'm like, yeah, he's really cleaned himself up. He goes, nah, he's got like his haircut's sharper, his beard's trim. He looks thinner. He's got more color in his face. He doesn't look like he's dying. Like, you must have looked like crap to everybody before you had the heart attack. Like, there were signs, just all of us thought you were just giving up on life.
Well, I don't know if they're wrong, but
you have this renewed sense of life now, which I love seeing.
You know, I've had a couple of major illnesses, and I also had a kidney transplant 15 years ago. And thank you to my sister for donating, and sign the back of your card and all that. So, but the first time I went out after my kidney transplant, my aunt walked up to me, and I was at a bar, and she just looked at me and she goes, "Can I just say you look so much better?" And I said, "Well, thank you." And she goes, "I mean, you really look like crap before." And we all just kind of sat there.
Everybody's saying the same thing about you. I feel so bad saying it, but you look great.
It's cyclical. I'll look good for a while. Then if I start to look like crap again, just expect surgery and I'll be fine.
Okay, no, next time you start looking like that, I'm just going to say something to you. All right?
Okay,
I was trying to be
do
nice.
that too. That's also the other part of this is that when I start to look like crap, nobody says anything. It's like, at least ask, are you okay?
Yeah, I should have said something to you. I think I felt bad saying something to you. Honest to goodness, I think I felt bad because I was like in the tail end of the divorce. I was dating. I was feeling pretty good about myself. I still do, but like I was feeling pretty good about myself. And I was like, poor Ed. Like I don't want to tell him he looks like crap when I'm like riding on cloud 9 right now, living my life and getting out of all the bad stuff that was going on with me. I don't want to be like, hey buddy, you look like crap. So next time I'll make sure I tell you look like crap before the next heart attack.
No, by all means, even if you're riding high, don't wait until you're riding low to drag me with you. It's better when you're riding high. and you sit there and say, look, everything's going great for me, by the way.
Right.
You look like a can of smashed asses. Okay. Just,
Anyway, and speaking of riding high and riding low, like I've really tried to like take care of myself. Yeah, and I've been going to the gym. I've been swimming laps because, my son got me into that because he plays water polo for Brother Rice. He's like, Dad, instead of lifting weights, why don't you swim? And it's such a difference. So I hit the lap pool at the gym all the time. And I've told myself, like, I want to be healthy and I'm trying, like, not to go out drinking. But the day-to-day is so beautiful. I'm pretty sure by the time this episode is aired, I went day drinking on Friday because it looks gorgeous out there. It's appetizers and craft beer right now.
Even the most healthiest people will have a cheat day. They just the pompous ones don't admit it. It's
appetizers and craft beer day today. That's what it feels like that with the weather. The White Sox, let's talk about them. That's what the show's about. The White Sox
only by name and theme, yes. But.
They finally win a game, and they lose Andrew Benintendi for 4 to 6 weeks. And my initial reaction, and I think that reaction stays the same today as I sit here and talk with all of you, is that's it for my hope that he's going to get out of the gate and be a better player and hit better and possibly be something that I can trade at the deadline. Because I think players that don't get a full spring really have the deck stacked against them. And you see it more with pitchers for sure. I mean, remember all the Boris clients last year who held out and how bad they were. And I expect rebounds from all of those pitchers this year because they got a regular offseason with a team and a spring training. It's not like they forgot how to pitch, but hitters have a problem just like pitchers. If their timing isn't down, if they haven't gotten that time to get ready when everybody else is getting ready, now they come out in a season when everybody's at 100% and they're ready to go and they're still in spring training mode. And so at this point, my hopes for Benintendi doing anything different than what he did in the first half of last year are dashed. Now, that may sound negative, but I just feel like we're looking for a guy to rebound after a terrible season and get his head straight and become as valuable as his contract suggests. And then maybe even move him. Like, I think the team is considering the idea of moving him. It's like a fire sale with this team. I don't think they want to keep him around. If somebody came knocking on the door and they could get pieces, they would move the rest of that contract. So I think right now the team's got to be disappointed. And I look at it and say, 4 to 6 weeks out with a broken hand. He has to work his way back, get his timing down with the swing again. He can't work on anything while he's healing, and he's going to have to start in the regular season. He maybe goes to extended spring training, or they bring him up here and he struggles for a while. Like that is in a year where you don't have very high expectations. That's a blow because there are things that he could have been, whether it's a trade chip or a bright spot, or they get out to a hot start and he's part of it. That's a real shame.
Well, and it's a hand injury too, which is going to make it that much worse because like you said, the recovery is going to be stunted. It's going to be something where he can't really do anything while he can't swing a bat. I mean, maybe one-handed, but what's that going to do for you? He's not going to have his timing down. He's going to go down to a minor league rehab assignment, and he'll face guys though that are not worth it. I mean, at least in spring training, and granted, you'll face a guy that is a major league pitcher who might be working on something and is just throwing fastballs, okay, or is just throwing changeups. So you get better timing, you get better feel, for the pitch within the at bat. But with Benintendi, if he was going to try and work on, what he was working on last year and hit for more power, and he did get to the 20 home run mark, then a hand injury is going to stunt that a little bit. And then if, he's coming back to what he was before, where he's trying to just be kind of an all-around hitter and hit for more average, that's going to be hurt by, like you said, the lack of timing. So is he going to be something by the All-Star break? Is he going to be something by the trade deadline? That's a tall order. The only thing you can hope for is that he is enough of a seasoned professional at this point that it's not going to impact him as much as it would, say, if Colson Montgomery got hurt and was unable to finish spring training and, had to start the season in the minors, where now he's not going to be a contributor at all. But, to your point about Benintendi, yeah, you want to get this contract off the books, because if the money's not going to be spent to the point where there's going to be a good payroll, a middle of the pack payroll even, then Andrew Benintendi is $15 million a year. While it's not egregious, while it is a standard major league contract, but it's too much for the White Sox to carry for one guy.
See, here's the thing. I wouldn't care because it's not my money. And also because I think you should have to field like a Major League Baseball team, and you got too many other holes on this team. You have too many young guys trying to make the team. I wouldn't move him. I'm just saying I think the team would want to move him. And you're right. He may have a good month or two before the trade deadline and make himself valuable enough for a team that says, okay, he did get off to a slow start, but look at his last month or so. There's a reason behind it. We want to go and get him. So it's not totally out of the question. But if I'm the White Sox right now, I think that I don't rush him. I think that I give him extended spring training. I make sure that he's ready to go. I'm not bringing him right in the moment that his hand is healed and letting him work it out the major league level. You got enough other guys that want an opportunity that might be able to show you something as you're going through this. I think in that first month may be an extension of spring training, seeing if a guy's got it, that you might be able to find something long-term in. I wouldn't rush him up because in the end, his stats in the first month are not going to matter one way or another. So to me, Andrew Benintendi's hurt. I think you got to look at next man up. I think guys like Dominic Fletcher should be excited because they might make the team, and he's already got a home run. Look at Dominic Fletcher.
Hey, how about you?
My little Dominic is got his first dinger, and there's not a lot of them there. And when you look at these guys and how they're being used right now, they're really spreading it out. Like I think there's one guy with double-digit at-bats right now on this team. There's a rotation at catcher. There's like a 3-man rotation. There's a lot we can get into in that. Before we get into that, a quick reminder. For exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. I was once a window salesman, Ed. I don't know if you know this. I did it for a couple of months. I wasn't intended to be a window salesman, but right around the time of the housing crisis back in 2007, the company I was working for asked me to start selling windows because things were going bad, and I was really on the business development and promotion side. So suddenly I was a sales guy, and I was terrible at it. But I would walk in with these.
I always wanted to be a mirror salesman. It's just something I could see myself doing.
That was a terrible joke. I would walk in there with these like crappy windows that would be in the trunk of my car, and they were half broken. They were little tiny things where I was just demonstrating how the window works. And I'd walk into somebody's house, and I'm tracking it. When it was raining, you're tracking in mud. You know, it's uncomfortable. You're in somebody else's home. You're trying to sell them something. I don't think it was comfortable for them. And one of the instructions that I would get was, tell them that the deal is better, but the moment you walk out the door, they'll never get that deal again. Like, it's a pressure thing. And they don't do that at Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. That's why I like working with them. You go in and see them in their showroom. You get to ask all the questions you want to. If you're doing add-ons, a different doorknob, whatever, it's not in a book. They have the example right there for you to see it. There's an owner in showroom and on site. They use all of their own installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way in Oak Forest since 1985 with all major brands custom made. No stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is located a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. And as I look at the lineups over the first week or so of spring training, they're telling as to how they view some of their players, but nobody's getting more opportunity really than anybody else. I think the guys that are up at the top of the order are clearly guys that are making the team or that they think have a chance of making the team, and they want to get them as many at-bats as possible. Joey Gallo's getting an awful lot right now. Like over the last 4 or 5 days, like he's at least in there every other day. There's a few guys that are playing every other day. They're rotating 3 catchers right now equally, probably to make sure that their knees don't get tired. I don't know if there's a competition at catcher because it feels like Thies is the guy. Like I would think they're going to go with him to handle the staff.
Like it, right?
Right. I mean, like, look, a couple years ago, you could make an argument that Omar Narvaez was good enough with the bat that you would put up with the defensive woes. But now I think as a team, you want to make sure that young pitching staff is handled correctly. So I would imagine that's how that's going to go. And it's interesting. Lenin Sosa, I think, is really trying out for the third base job, but they are moving him around a little bit because in just a small sample size, he is hitting the ball, right? He's not looking.
He's got more hits than anybody on the team right now.
Right. He's not looking lost
3,
at the plate.
I
right.
mean, it's not, let's not get out of over our skis here, but you're right. There's a lot that you can kind of take away, but nothing that you can really take away here.
Right. He's got 7 plate appearances. He's walked twice. He's got 3 hits. And he's got a couple, I think he's got at least 1 extra base hit. He's driven in 3 runs. He's playing well. This is a guy who I said, look, he can't play defense very well. But if the bat is what it was in the last couple of months, you waited long enough to see if he could reproduce what he was doing in the minor leagues. Don't just move on from him. And I think that he may make a case this spring. He's one of the more interesting stories this spring because they don't have a legit spot for him based upon the idea that Vargas is going to be the third baseman. I bet you no matter how badly he plays. Like, watch him go out.
I was about to say, he's going to hit like 104 in the spring.
And they're going to start.
He's still going to be starting. Yeah.
He's going to hit 104 and not do anything spectacular over a third. You can already see, depending on who's standing at shortstop, there's a giant hole between the shortstop and the third baseman with him out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He hasn't done anything defensively to make you think that he's not the second coming of Joe Crede at all.
No, he's not Yoan Moncada either. Yoan Moncada could field the position. Yoan Moncada was a good, solid defensive third baseman when he was able to go out there and play. Joe Crede, when he didn't have back issues, could play third base. Robin Ventura was spectacular. He is not one of these guys. Okay, he's Herbert Perry over there.
Yeah, he might be Herbert Perry. I was about to say, is he at least the milkman? Like, can he deliver?
Like, I'm trying to find like a White Sox comparison. He might be Herbert Perry standing over there. Like, that might be about his mobility while he stands over there. And you're going to have a rookie possibly over at short. Or you're going to, I mean, you've tried Mydroth over there. Mydroth doesn't have the range.
Yeah.
Mydroth doesn't have the range to cover him.
And Colson doesn't have really have the range to cover him. Neither of those guys are real true shortstops in the sense of like, look at the defensive wizardry over there. Those guys are there because of their bat.
And that's the problem right now. You as an organization have to decide what's the most important thing this year for you. Is the most important thing this young staff? Because if the most important thing is the young staff, go defensive. Go defensive and make sure they can field their position and that it's going to make it easier for these young pitchers to get out of innings so they're not trying to throw a perfect pitch because the defense can't handle things that a better defense could handle. And go defensive. And have a couple of guys in there in the middle of the order that might be able to put together some runs and play a little bit of small ball. That I would do that with my pitching staff. If you go halfway and you've got guys in there that can't really hit, and that's the problem. You can't field a team that's going to be a good hitting team. Like, this team's not going to place in the top 10 in batting average or slugging percentage or OPS. No. This is not going to be a highly offensive team. They don't have the talent. So if you halfway it and you don't have a good defense all around the horn, and you really don't have the bats to make up for bad defense, you're going to have a lot of pitchers pressing. And do you want that for your pitching staff? And that's the conundrum that this team has right now. Because I just mentioned it. You may want to go with the more defensive catcher. We've talked about the idea of Edgar Carroll possibly making the team. And if he made the team, and I don't see him in there catching at all, right? Like, I'm not seeing it. Is he hurt? Am I missing something?
Not that I'm aware.
I can't figure out if I'm missing something
that keeps him from behind the plate.
Okay, but here's the thing: like, if you're going to worry about making sure that the battery has catchers that are going to take care of your pitchers, it seems like you're leaning towards defense over offense. Putting Vargas out at third base because you traded for him. This seems like old school White Sox. We don't want to admit that we're wrong. Like, we made a trade. We don't want to admit that we're wrong. We don't like the fact that people trash this move, that say we got fleeced. We did a 3-team trade that helped one team win a World Series and made the other team better. And you ended up with Miguel Vargas. And like we said on the last show, Miguel Vargas, the team that had him, that has a history of being really good at evaluating players and winning baseball games, didn't think he was an everyday player or a third baseman. And you're making him the everyday third baseman. And the defensive issue is something I don't think we really got into on the last show, but that's something that they're going to run into. So it'll be interesting to see, 1, how long do you stick with him? 2, are you really going to leave an opening there? There's an opening in the infield where a well-placed ball is going to get through where it wouldn't get through in other infields. And I'm seeing it watching the games. By the naked eye, I don't know what the metrics say, but naked eye, it feels like there's a hole over there because he doesn't have the range and because they don't have somebody as short that can cover defensively his shortcomings.
Yeah, you would tend to think if they were going to go defense, Josh Rojas would be the third baseman.
Right.
That's probably, I mean, Brian Ramos and Lenin Sosa, neither of them are great defensively either.
Why not put Rojas at third? Like, think about this. Let's just be logical. Put Rojas at third, put Mydroth over at second, and have Sosa be a utility guy that moves around, and every once in a while you want to put Vargas over third. You feel like you got the right lineup or something. Sure, you want to try him out somewhere. Fine. The Dodgers also used him at second base, but then have a DH
the White Sox used him at left field last year, and now you've got a perfect opportunity because Andrew Benintendi's hurt.
Well, that's the other thing. He could be the left fielder. He can be a regular everyday DH and let him concentrate on hitting because he's got a real problem with that. Why are you overloading a guy that you've now decided you need to prove us all wrong about? You got to prove us wrong. You got to prove the Dodgers gave up on him too early, and you got to prove yourself to be a genius. And instead of saying, okay, well, first, let's let him concentrate on one thing, which is hitting, or make it easier on him, you're going to put him at the hot corner, and he has had problems enough there that the Dodgers moved him away from there. And you're going to put him at the hot corner, and you're going to expect him to start hitting better, and you're going to put him up in the middle of your order. I guarantee you he's sitting in the top 5 spots in the lineup. Because they're so convinced with him.
Yes.
And I think what you're doing is you're overloading a player who has not yet shown that he can do anything positive at the major league level. This is again, square peg round hole. I know I'm in danger of doing basically the same show as I did last week, so I don't want to sit on Vargas for too long here. But it is amazing to me that with Benintendi's injury, that it wouldn't be considered that you could put him out in left field or that you could put him at DH. Because Benintendi really, I mean, we already heard that from the team. Will Venable was saying it. He's going to be playing every day, but the way he suggested it wasn't necessarily going to be always in the outfield. So he's clearly somebody they were thinking about at DH, and we've suggested it as well. And I think the smart money would be that you would use him in that role a lot. Well, now coming out, starting the season, he's not really going to be there. He's got to get himself up to speed. Why not consider Vargas as a designated hitter more than a third baseman? And it'll be interesting to see here in the coming days after the injury to Benintendi if they do the smart thing and they start doing that. He's got to get to hitting, this kid. They got to get his bat going more than anything because he's not a defensive specialist. He's a bat. You need that bat to be good. That should be your number one priority. And if he's going to hurt you defensively, then put that bat in the DH role because it's not like you have another guy that you've invested so much in. Like if they really believe we invested all those players, even though the players that they gave away in that trade, it wasn't like those guys were part of the long-term plan anyway, right? Like this is like you traded away guys that weren't really part of your long-term plan anyway. So what did you give up for Vargas long-term? Not much. But if you feel like you need to prove it to everybody that it was a good move and you feel like you invested a lot to go get him, then get his bat right. Because that's the first thing you got to do with him. Because he's not going to become a defensive specialist and you need the bat for the trade to make sense.
Well, and this just reminds me of bringing up Andrew Vaughn, and then all of a sudden he's an outfielder because you have a first baseman in Jose Abreu. And you're bringing up Andrew Vaughn and you're putting him in a position he's never been in before. And even go back to listen to the show where Liam Hendricks came on with us, and he talked about, he admired the hustle and what he was trying to do as far as Vaughn going out in the outfield. But we also, as fans, had to sit there and watch it, and it was not pretty. And Gavin Sheets had the same thing. There's a guy that came up, neither of them were really up there for their defense. They were up there because they were supposed to hit. That's Andrew Vaughn's calling card. That was Gavin Sheets' calling card. So Miguel Vargas falls into that exact same piece where you're right. It's his bat that you traded for, not his glove. Is his glove good enough to get by somewhere on the field that if his bat says, play me every day, you can live with it? Yeah. Is that going to be at third base? That seems like a bad idea. If, like you said, you got a young pitching staff, and we know so far that at least one young pitcher has made the rotation. That's Jonathan Cannon, because Will Venable said that he and Davis Martin are part of the rotation until further notice. Right,
and Martin Perez is going to make that rotation. So
and Martin Perez, but I'm not worried about Martin Perez's, his fragile ego when his third baseman is terrible. He's pitched on some teams where he's had no one behind him before. So
think about Vargas here for a moment, okay? If you get him hitting and Andrew Vaughn doesn't become anything better, you're also this year with that arbitration agreement, you're saying we're going to give him one more year here, even though he hasn't really earned that money. This is Vaughn's
last chance.
This should be Vaughn's last chance.
Right.
So if you're able to get Vargas hitting in the DH spot and Vaughn comes out and is just what he always was, and he's not a defensive specialist over at first base, Vargas could stand at first. Right? Vargas could move over to first and you could at least solve that problem. It just feels like they're not valuing their players the way that I think anybody on the outside looking in would value their players because they're too attached to them. We've talked about this before with front offices. We talked about this with general managers. We've talked about the idea that they get to know the player. They kind of convince themselves that somebody's better than what they are, or they are something that they're not. They made a trade to bring a guy in, and they start looking through it through tinted glasses, and they don't see it. The goal for him should be get him the hit. Get him the hit, and then you have somebody you could play in multiple different positions, even if he doesn't work out at third base. You got Rojas because he could cover third as well. You got Mydroth because he makes sense to be a second baseman. Like, that's where it should be. Mydroth should be at second. Rojas should be over at third. And you should be trying to figure out whether or not Montgomery's right and ready at shortstop, or if it's going to be Baldwin, or if it's going to be Amaya, or whatever you're going to do over there until Montgomery is right. And then first base is Andrew Vaughn's while you're working on trying to figure out whether or not Sosa is real or Vargas can hit. And those three guys right there should really be an open competition against each other. And Vargas, if he's a bat, they'll find a spot for him. If Sosa's a bat, they'll find a spot for him. If Vaughn is a bat, he'll hold on to the spot. But if he's not, he gets out of the way. That's really how they should look at this team at this point, especially if you're looking at this team through the idea that Luis Robert Jr. is somebody you want to trade if he gets out of the gate because you don't intend to pay him the $20 million a year for the next 2 years after this. So if you don't think your window's opening soon, you should have no loyalty to any of these guys, and you should understand what they are. If you're not good at defense, you shouldn't be standing at third base or shortstop or any of the positions that need really good defense. And if the guy's upside, if his best trait is his bat, or at least his potential is his bat, and let's be honest, Vaughn's best trait was supposed to be his bat. Smooth swing, already at a professional level. That's why we're able to bring him up right now. And he should be hitting doubles, and those are going to eventually turn into home runs. Remember that? That's what I was sold a few years ago.
That was the deal. Yeah, watch this guy spray the ball all over the field, and eventually those are going to go over the fence.
It was not defensive specialist. Okay. And Vargas is clearly not defensive specialist. It's a bat. And Sosa is clearly not defensive specialist. It's a bat. It's a bat that you didn't even expect. Like he's the dark horse guy who just at every level after a certain amount of time got better and then was able to produce so well that he kept getting elevated. Like he's not the guy in their plans. He's the guy trying to change their plans. Like, that's why I find him so intriguing.
He's the guy making the plans for them, not the other way around.
Right. And so but the thing is, all those guys, all those names really should be in the same pot. Okay. They shouldn't be spread out at different parts of the field. Like, I don't see any scenario where I'm happy with Lenyn Sosa standing at third base or second base or shortstop, even if he's hitting. I see no scenario where I'm happy with having Vargas over at third if he's hitting. Unless I have Sosa, Vaughn, and Vargas all hitting so damn well that I don't care about the defense.
Yeah. If you get to a point, go ahead, let it fly. We don't care what happens.
We're going to win softball games.
We're just going to win softball games.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen. Like, that's the thing. That's not going to happen.
No, this team is not talented enough, and also no team is really talented enough to slug their way through really being competitive. Because at some point and on some level, good pitching is going to overcome these guys on big stages and in big games, and that has been baseball history 101 for a very, very long time. So what you're really hoping for, though, is, I think, Miguel Vargas, if he becomes a bat, becomes a guy that you sit there and you say, okay, he's going to realize his potential, and this is somebody that we can build around. Lenyn Sosa, if he becomes a bat, you find a spot for him, or he becomes such a good bat that somebody sits there and goes, you know what? I can live with him at second base because my shortstop's really, really good, and my first baseman's really, really good, and I'll take him on, or we think we could do something with this guy, and he becomes somebody else's Miguel Vargas, okay, except for, he can actually hit. And your hope for Colson Montgomery is that he becomes a competent enough shortstop that if you put a competent third baseman next to him and a competent second baseman next to him, that it works out. And the reason why you sign a Josh Rojas is competence at two of those positions to buff it for Colson Montgomery this year in his rookie year if you expect him to be up there. And the reason why you trade for Chase Mydroth, like you said, is one, positional versatility and a bat, but also because if you're going to have him as an everyday player, second base is that opening where you kind of want somebody who gets on base and has that contact stuff. There's a lot of moving parts here, and none of them are particularly good moving parts, but you got to figure out what makes the most sense and what's actually going to not win you ball games, but isn't going to lose you ball games.
is now time for the Sox Nerd, Dave Marin, who puts all those trivia nuggets and tidbits up on the scoreboard at the rate each and every home game. And then he joins us each and every week, in season and off season, here on Sox in the Basement. And he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. St. Patrick's Day is going to be celebrated with a huge parade coming up on the 8th of March. You may see me out there. And check out the new Lamont Unlocked podcast, all of it at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, another week closer to opening day, so let's continue to prep me for the scoreboard season, shall we? Following Rojas, Slater, and Boozer, let's take a look at Mike Tauchman, who was signed on December 11th. The outfielder is a local, which always makes for good content. Tauchman is the only big league player born in Palatine, but not the only product of Palatine's Fremd High School to play in the bigs. Todd Hundley, Randy's son who took the Cubs for a ride in the early 2000s, is also a proud Viking. I've talked of Tauchman's Bradley and Sox connection on an earlier podcast, so you remember that he will join Don Seacrest, Rob Scahill, Mike Dunn, and Guy Hoffman as products of the Peoria School to play for the Southsiders. He will be the first position player from Bradley to play for the Sox, however. Tauchman is third among big league Bradley products with 32 home runs behind Bill Tuttle's 67, but he will never catch Hall of Famer Kirby Puckett, who is first at 207. Tauchman is versatile. He has played at least 102 games at each outfield position. How has he done as a left fielder, you ask, especially with Benintendi down for a spell? He has played the most games there at 135, and he has hit the most homers at 16, but he hits just 241 when playing there as opposed to 278 in the 119 games he's played in center. As for his defense, Tauchman has performed the best in left with just 2 errors in 1,001 innings. Tauchman has made at least 2 starts in every spot in the batting order. His most productive slots are 1st and 9th, where he has hit 20 of his 32 home runs. A left-handed hitter, Tauchman is way better against lefties than righties. How much better? How about 27 points on the batting average and 12 points on the OBP? Tauchman is a beast in Minnesota, hitting .539, that's 7 for 13 in target field, and he kills the Red Sox with a .351, .435, and .554 slash line in 26 games. On an unrelated note, Chris, I heard your segment on Minnesota Joe on a recent podcast. You mentioned that your late friend showed you how another fan base could be just as angry and angst-filled as ours. I present to you Sticks. Let's call them Wisconsin Sticks from my world. Despite their successful business model, the Brewers do not have a championship. They don't even have the long-ago title we got, or Minnesota Joe got, and that drives Sticks crazy. I would never wish being a Wisconsin sports fan on anyone, he once texted me after a grueling Brewers loss. He continued, "The Brewers are the worst franchise in the history of sports to be a fan of. This isn't even an argument. Even more, rooting for the Sox is 5,000 times better. The Brewers will never, ever win a World Series. Not a chance." And one more. The Sox won a World Series less than 20 years ago. End of argument. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you that gems like these and long-form pieces are on my blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. By the way, I've started posting a daily random Sox list on my blog. In honor of the new month, I have a March-themed list on there today. My zinger? In honor of the 20th anniversary of the World Champions, I'm going to zing frequently about that team, throwing out some gems you may not know about the 2005 Sox. Did you know that the player who led the 05 champs in batting average, regardless of at-bats, was Joe Borchard, who hit .417, that's 5 for 12. That's it, Chris. More than you probably wanted to know about Tauchman, Palatine, Fremd High School, my guy Sticks, and Joe Borchard.
Before we get out of here, real quick, give me 30 seconds on your feeling about the amount of runs they're giving up. Because you mentioned this, we didn't get to it today. We'll probably get into it more in the next episode. But you're not concerned about the amount of runs being given up by the pitching staff.
Look at the guys who are giving up the runs are guys like Shane Smith and Justin Anderson. Do you care? Right? Do you really care if Brandon Eisert has a bad game? Jared Schuster's the only one that I've seen that had a rough go that you're sitting there going, oh, well, he seems to be in the plans. The guys that are getting outs, right? The guys that aren't getting lit up, are Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, Davis Martin, guys that you expect to be on the team.
And some young guys, Sean Burke.
Sean Burke.
Got some outs.
Sean
He had a
Burke
nice one. Mason Adams looked really good when he was out there.
Good.
Jordan Leisure, who I really think, man, when are we going to give him another chance or a better chance at being the closer? Because I'd like to see that.
I think when he proves that he can be a setup man, I think he can move into the closer
I think that's
role,
probably what happens. But look, to your point, I pulled up their stats. You have 14 pitchers currently who have taken the ball and at least had one inning for this team where their walks and hits per innings pitched is 1 or lower. They put on one base runner or less over the innings that they've pitched. So don't worry. You have pitchers on this team. They're just spreading things out. Don't panic.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.